Chapter 16. Hogsmeade Part 1. Everyone was on edge that morning, not because of the interviews of yesterday but because of the paper currently held by nearly every student in the Great Hall. The small group of reincarnates and Hermione, who had decided to sit with them instead of the others, were all glancing at Sephiroth nervously. They watched as those acid green eyes swept across the Daily Prophet, their depth slowly darkening and darkening with each pass over the page. Slowly Sephiroth folded the newspaper and set it down on the table, his face completely emotionless as he picked up his milk and started to drink. Setting it down, he steepled his fingers, setting his chin on them. Anyone know where the black material went? Tseng shook his head, seeing that Sephiroth was actually really pissed off. He had just slipped back behind his mask. Honestly, he couldn't blame him. He was pissed himself, but just like Sephiroth, he had hidden his emotions behind the Turk mask. The Ministry had gone one step too far this time. They had a current picture of Harry showing the changed looks and the eyes. They were claiming he was so insane now that he was trying to become the Dark Lord, all because of the cat-slit A's. They wish to have a Dark Lord. I will grant them that request. We don't need you going niblime on their ass. Zack shook his head frankly. He would love to see the Ministry burn at this point, but they didn't need to put any more attention to Sephiroth. Come on don't let it bug you. We're going to Hogsmeade. You're gonna get laid. Forget all this for a day. Sephiroth couldn't help but snort and sent an amused glance at Zack. Eloquent as usual, Zachary. Tseng shook his head, though he had to agree, though if anything happened today they were on their own. He was not getting into. As Zack said, Seph wasn't the only one getting laid today. There was no way in hell he was giving this opportunity up. He missed his husband and missed that soldier body. We're not gonna see you at all today, are we, Tseng? Saisnai was looking at her boss, seeing that look in those steel-colored eyes. Only if you're at the inn. That's the only way you're going to see me. Seph, it's gonna be a half and half deal. Half in the inn, half in Honeydukes. Instantly Sephiroth's head shot up and looked at them. He had completely forgotten about Honeydukes. Instantly those acid green eyes start to shine at the thought of so much sugar and candy and chocolate and Oh shit, we lost him, you. The group all laughed, seeing Sephiroth was now bouncing in his seat. All right, let's go. In the Three Broomsticks there was a certain auburn-haired first that was not exactly happy at the moment. That was actually an understatement. Slamming the paper down the Prophet, it instantly burst into flames, scorching the table. What the flying fuck is wrong with these damn people? Are they honestly that fucking bored that they have nothing better to do than to turn the world against a teenage boy? Oh, Genesis was furious. He looked over to the three across from him. Well, one was under the table eating happily. We'll handle it, General. Cloud said softly, making sure to keep his voice to a soldier whisper. We need to keep Seph from going insane again, and if he's harassed like this we may not be able to keep that from happening. I don't understand why they are even still in that school. Seph normally doesn't like to sit around. The faster we kill off that sob Voldemort, the faster we can get the hell out of London and away from this freak show they call a wizarding world. I know that it is hard to believe, Genesis, but they are safe here. As long as Dumbledore remains in the school, the Ministry can harass them to an extent, but they cannot do anything compared to what they could do if the boys were outside the school. Sighing, Genesis reached down, rubbing Nanaki's head. I know, Nanaki. Just pisses me off that we can't do anything. I wouldn't say we can't do anything. You don't insult a Turk. Or their family. Genesis looked over to Vincent, seeing that evil glint in his eyes. Oh yes. You never insult a Turk, and this little post in the paper had declared war on the Valentine name. So not only did you have the Turk side coming through, but you had the Wutai honor on top of it. Tomorrow. Vincent whispered, his eyes glinting with malice, for today let's enjoy our boys and allow them to enjoy themselves. And I do wish to spend some time with my son today, Genesis. He sent a pointed glare to the Auburn commander. Yeah. I know. I'll let you have him for a bit. Damn bossy ass Turks. Ron was not happy. Within 2 days he had lost both of his friends. Harry was claiming to be someone else, and what's worse is that Hermione now believed him. He really had to wonder what spell was being cast over those guys. He had gotten an owl back from his mother today. She was concerned about her 3 children and was coming up to speak to Dumbledore and see if she could catch her 3 wayward children here in Hogsmeade. Seamus thankfully was still on his side since Dean was one of the ones that was changing, but he and the girls seemed to be the only ones. Sephiroth, stopping the small group of non-crazy Gryffindors, turned just in time to see a silver and black's blur shoot past them at an ungodly speed. What the bloody hell was that? Seamus asked just as they watched the silver disappear into the village. They watched as Genesis moved out from the woods on the side of the road, shaking his head. Didn't even stop to say hi. That can only mean one thing. He knew his lover way too well. If he ignored everyone and everything, that means Sugar was around. What the hell are you still doing here? Blinking, Genesis looked over, seeing the small group glaring at him. Snorting, he tossed his head arrogantly, his deep red leather duster crinkling with his movements. He had gone with the duster he wore while he was at Shinra, hoping Sephiroth would recognize it, but it would seem as normal the Sugar had been calling him. My friends, the fates are cruel. There are no dreams, no one remains. The arrow has left the bow of the goddess. He smirked arrogantly, seeing the ginger turning red. Give it up, Weasley, you will never win against Genesis. He will hand you your charbroiled ass faster than you can draw your wand. Rufus walked past in an outfit very similar to the one he wore as VP of Shinra, Dark Nation trotting by his side as she always did. Only thing he was missing now was his beloved shotgun. His black half-gloved fingers kept a loose grip on Deanne's leash. It was mainly for appearance sake, as people might get freaked out since she wasn't disguised anymore. Shinra, Genesis said in greeting. Even though he knew that the young president had changed after Meteor, he still didn't trust him. You could never trust a Shinra. Commander Rhapsodos. Rufus nodded his head to him and headed into town. Your lover is in the candy shop. He called back over his shoulder. I kind of figured when I felt a disturbance in the force and all I saw was a mecha-fueled blur shoot past me. Shaking his head, he sent another smug smile to Ron and the group before heading off to find his wayward sugar-addicted lover. You love digging yourself a hole, don't you, Ronald? Tseng said, walking by. He was in something similar to what he normally wore when he was off duty at Shinra. While he still kept the professional look, his dark green shirt was untucked and a few buttons around the collar were undone with sleeves rolled up. Seeing a blonde moving up the drive, he gave them a very Reno wave and jogged up, slipping his arm around Cloud's waist and leaned in against him. Hotel? Cloud asked, seeing that dark glint in those steel eyes. What do you think? I've seen Hogsmeade enough to last me a lifetime. Chuckling softly, Cloud pulled him towards the 3 broomsticks where they had the inn above it. I wonder. Still with his hand wrapped around his young husband's waist, Cloud's fingers snaked down to the dividing line between his hip and pelvis on his left side. It was harder to judge as Tseng was still not up to his full height, but he knew generally where it was. Taking a chance, he pressed in against a spot he was hoping was it. The response was almost instantaneous. A loud gasp left Tseng's lips, his steps staggering, and his grip around him tightened almost to pain. Smirking, he looked down now, seeing those steel eyes were nearly black with lust and he was being looked at like a piece of meat to a starving dog. If he had retained that from his former body, there would be a small half-inch misshapen crescent moon birthmark there. That spot marked a bundle of nerves right on the surface that were nearly as powerful as the bundle of nerves up inside the man. At one point he had actually made the man orgasm with simply teasing that spot. It was that powerful. You will not be walking out of here. Tseng growled, eyes dark as they moved into the 3 broomsticks. Oh, it was not only an instant pleasure spot. It also turned him into a dominant. Ignoring the students that were already in the broomsticks, the 2 headed up to the room Cloud had already rented. Reaching the room, Tseng didn't wait for Cloud to fully close the door and lock it before he was on him, fingers gripping soft blonde hair, pulling his head back, revealing that wonderful tan neck to him. You don't know how much I missed you," he purred, kissing up that wonderful expanse of skin. Moaning as warm soft lips moved across a pleasure spot, Cloud tilted his head back, allowing his husband more room. "I watched you as often as I could from the live stream, making sure you were all right." Cloud froze hearing that. "Did you see everything?" Feeling the change in Cloud, Tseng released his hair and stepped back, looking up into those beautiful blue eyes. "Yes Cloud, I already know about you and Genesis and Vincent. I don't mind. None of us knew that we were going to be given a second chance. I didn't want you to hold out when you had a chance at happiness." Reaching up, he gently ran a hand along Cloud's cheek. Snorting slightly, Cloud shook his head. "For being a Turk you sure are a softie." Blinking, Tseng growled at that. "Oh really? Is that a challenge? You know it. I hope you don't plan on getting your security deposit back for this room." Moving through the town, Genesis acted as normal as possible, though he could feel the eyes watching him and sense those following him. One was a man, the other was in animagus form. Frowning, he ducked into an alleyway, clicking on his mic. "Vincent, I got someone following me. Keep an eye on Sephiroth while I dispose of these two." He shut the mic off again, having made sure to keep his voice low. Reaching into his duster, he summoned Rapier and kept it against his body and hidden inside his duster. He could hear the soft padding of the animagus behind him. Speeding up slightly, he rounded the corner, hearing the footsteps of a human picking up. Hearing them reach the edge of the alleyway, he threw out Rapier, watching as a man stopped just short of decapitating himself. Moving out, Genesis kept Rapier raised, the tip right at the man's throat. He could see a black dog at his side. Knowing that was the animagus, he would keep an eye on the dog, but he was more worried about the wizard in front of him. He was young but looked like he was aging horribly. Seeing the scars on his face that were still ugly, he knew instantly what that strange feeling was. "Werewolf. Why are you following me?" The man held up his hands to show he was no threat. Well, if he wasn't a wizard, he wouldn't have been a threat. Genesis hadn't been alive as long as he had to take a wizard for granted. "Please, we mean you no harm," the man said. His voice was strong and confident. "Are you with the ministry?" Genesis pressed, not taking his eyes off the two of them for a minute. The man in front of him shook his head. "No, we have no affiliation with the ministry. We are simply concerned. You see, Harry Potter is my friend's godson. My best friend's son. You must be Remus Lupin." Genesis had spent a bit of time talking with his lover after Hermione had returned to the common room. He had been told about Remus Lupin, Sirius Black and Peter the Rat. The animagus must be black. Slowly Genesis lowered his sword. Sephiroth had told him that both these men were pretty much non-violent, and honestly the only threat between the two of them was the slightly enhanced strength of the werewolf. September. Harry. Genesis corrected himself, knowing Sephiroth had yet to tell Remus and Sirius about his change. "Has told me a lot about you both." Twisting his sword in his hand, he allowed the magnet to catch through the leather of his duster and pull his sword in against the normally never used weapon harness on his back. "Then you are friends with Harry?" Harry wouldn't tell anyone about Sirius, especially that he was an animagus. "You could say we're friends." Genesis flipped his hair back behind his shoulder in his normal arrogant fashion. "I am assuming you tracked me down to get answers. Shall we go somewhere where your friend may transform back without the chance of him being arrested?" Remus gave him a wary look. The man exuded pure power and he had the exact same acidic chemical smell Harry had, only his was by far stronger. "You are very trusting to willing walk out with two unknown wizards." Genesis sent him an arrogant smirk. "Oh, I do not trust you. Humans just lost their threat to me many years ago." "You believe you are not human?" Remus shot a look to Sirius, who was padding beside him, his hackles raised at the man. "Oh, I know I am a monster," Genesis said, as if to prove it. He walked over a very large puddle that Sirius would have been knee-deep in. "Dog form, and yet Genesis' boots walked on top of the water as if it was solid. I have never been human, and I never will be. Remus frowned, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Maybe following this man wasn't such a good idea. The wolf inside of him was cowering, which was never a good sign. Reaching a small section of woods, Genesis moved just within the tree line and sat gracefully on a felled tree. He crossed a leg over his knee and threaded his fingers in front of his knee, all the world appearing to be completely at ease. Those that knew him though knew he could behead both men in front of him before they even had time to draw their wands to attack. Seeing they were out of view of the village, Sirius transformed, his dark eyes glaring down at the man in front of him. "What is happening to my godson?" he growled, the dog in him showing up. Genesis raised a single brow, his fingers coming up to push his hair back once more. "You will have to be a little more specific. What have you seen with him?" Resisting the urge to growl at the arrogant man, Sirius reined his temper in, knowing it would do no good for Harry to get angry at the man. Over the summer right before he left for Hogwarts, when Harry was walking up the stairs, he was a completely different person. Sighing softly, Genesis withdrew his beloved Loveless and flipped it open, pulling out one of the many photographs he kept within the pages and held it out. Remus moved to stand next to his dear friend and looked down. The picture was of Sephiroth lounging in full battle leather, Masamune by his side against a tree in Deae. They had just gotten done fighting a bloody battle, and this was within the main base. Genesis had kept this picture because of the small smile on Sephiroth's face. It was the only time the man ever smiled in Deae, and he was only smiling because a third class had just face planted in a mud puddle behind Genesis, getting the Crimson Commander covered in mud. "That's who I saw," Sirius said, looking over the photograph. There was no way he could not recognize that man. That photograph was taken almost 9,000 years ago after the Battle of Deae. The man you see in the picture was Soldier First Class General Sephiroth. Both Remus and Sirius looked up from the picture and over to the man. 9,000 years. Genesis nodded. "Our world is known to you as Atlantis. Though we called it Midgar." Taking a deep breath to keep a level head, Sirius looked back at the photograph. Why did Harry appear as this General Sephiroth? Because Harry is Sephiroth. The planet gave him a chance to repent for the sins of his past. "Do you really expect us to believe that?" Sirius growled. Genesis, faster than lightning, snatched the picture out of his hand before he could destroy it. He lovingly stuck it back in his book and tucked the book back into his jacket. "Sirius." Remus moved a little forward to draw attention to him and away from his irate friend. Sirius was known for having a hot head, and they didn't need that right now. "You said the planet, as in the planet, is alive." Genesis nodded once more, threading his fingers together in front of his knees. "In a sense, it is more like one giant conscious that keeps the planet alive. We called it the life stream. When someone dies, they returns to the life stream, their memories and experience joins that of billions of others, becoming one voice." He looked away, his eyes going far away slightly. "Except those that carry the Genova cells, they can never become one with the life stream, as the cells will taint and corrode the stream, killing it and in turn killing the planet." "Genova? The calamity from the skies?" Genesis instantly perked up at this, his pale blue eyes meeting the amber of Remus. "Remus?" Sirius was confused, he had never heard of this. Remus turned to his friend, his eyes slightly understanding. "It's a very old tale passed down among most magical creatures. I heard it from the centaurs when they found me after one of my transformations. It was said to be a creature that crashed into the land many thousands of years ago and nearly wiped out a race they called Cetra. They called it the calamity from the sky. It nearly destroyed the planet. Said it created a scar that the planet could not heal." He turned back to look at Genesis. She was sealed away because they could not kill her. But she was unearthed thousands of years later by the humans' ancestors that had survived, and she was named Genova. Her son nearly destroyed the world by casting forth a giant meteor from the sky. But the planet rose up against it, destroying him and the meteor. Genesis made a motion with his hand. More or less that's pretty close to what happened. It was actually a group that defeated the calamity that was parading around in her son's stolen form, as he had died 4 years prior and the planet-destroyed meteor. Remus looked the man over in front of him. How would you know this when it's fallen into even legend with the magical creatures of the world? Smirking, Genesis stood fluidly, his body uncoiling like a snake. I guess I should actually introduce myself. Soldier First Class Commander Genesis Rhapsodos, Genova Project G. I was the first human to be injected with Genova cells after her unearthing. Both Remus and Sirius stepped back, their eyes going wary as they looked the man over. That would mean you're over 9,000 years old. Yes. I can only die if killed. Genova projects do not age. If you're a Genova project, what are you? Remus was slowly starting to understand. You said Sephiroth was a soldier first as well, General. Which is above you? Genesis nodded, seeing that the wolf was very intelligent. 3 children were born of the Genova projects, a 4th was created sometime later. When Genova was uncovered, they believed her to be an entombed Cetra. Shinra, in his infinite need of power and greed, instructed the scientist who unearthed her, Professor Gast, to start experimentations to recreate the long-lost Cetra. Genesis sat back down, but he was a little stiffer now. He honestly hated to think about the circumstances of his birth. This began Project G, or Project Jillian, after the host mother and lover of Professor Hollander, who was running the project under Gast. They believed that simply injecting the host mother with the Genova cells it would transfer into the unborn, but Hollander did not wish to endanger his lover and partner with impregnating her yet, so they removed her cells and impregnate another woman. His voice had turned bitter by this point. I am what they got. I showed no changes and appeared to be just a normal human. I was give away to the Rhapsodos, who under orders of Shinra raised me just in case. Lifting his hand, he flung it out, calling the monstrosity of a wing to burst forth, causing Remus and Sirius to jump back, both sets of eyes staring at the wing in fascination. Little did they know the monster I would become. He folded the wing in against his back, his fingers running almost lovingly over the black feathers. My friend Angel was the second creation of Project G and the last. He was a natural-born child of Jillian, though uncertain if her husband at the time is the Further or Hollander. He was also born normal, and the project was scrapped and assigned to Brandon Hojo, another scientist under Gast. Here his face was even more bitter than before. Hojo is a sick fuck, and I'm glad he is dead. Hojo, deeming Hollander a complete and utter buffoon and us trash that should have been disposed of at birth, took live Genova cells from the still active brain of the creature. He used his wife, who was pregnant with unknown to any but her lover's child. He injected both her and the unborn directly with the Genova cells. The child was born a success, a perfect monster, and so Projects was given the green light, and the child's cells plus that of Genova was used to create Soldier. Remus had a very sinking feeling in his gut. Honestly, after seeing the way people were treated today and in the past, this story sounded more real than any he had ever heard. Project S. Project Sephiroth. The Nightmare. Calamity's son. The One-Winged Angel. Demon of Wutai. He was known by many names through his short life. Hojo, believing that he would become a god and travel the stars just as Genova did before she landed here, set him up to discover the truth about his birth. Sephiroth. Genesis shook his head. True anger could be heard in his voice. Had been lied to his whole life about his parents. He was always very volatile about his creation. Always wondering who he was, who his family was. Why he was different from everyone else. Hojo set him up so that he would come under Genova's control and destroy the planet and ascend them both to godhood. Yes, Hojo was fucking insane. And he drove Sephiroth to insanity as well, leaving false information about his creation in the Shinra Manor just a mile away from where Genova's still alive body was being kept. He was driven insane. Slaughtered everyone in Nibelheim. He was killed in the reactor there, by a young man named Cloud Strife. You will actually see him. Genesis started to snicker at this. If we can pull him out of bed. He decided to leave out his own involvement in the fall from grace for the moment. Seeing the confused looks, he decided to take pity and elaborate. His husband was murdered and was reincarnated alongside Sephiroth and several others. Remus, you can't honestly believe all this, can you? Sirius' head was spinning with everything that he heard. If I didn't know of the calamity beforehand, it would find this hard to believe. But... He looked back at Genesis. Tell me. What is the acidic scent that Harry and yourself carries? Mago. Concentrated life stream that Shinra had found a way to harvest and use as a power source. They discovered that mixed with Genova cells it would created enhanced humans. A soldier upon graduation of the cadet program is injected with base levels of Mago and Genova cells and become third class. If they can handle more Mago and Genova cells after they have proven themselves, they are second class. They will have a stronger Mago smell and more acidic blood. First class is what I am. We have the highest concentration of Mago in our bloodstream. You can always tell a soldier from the glow in their eyes. Reaching up, Genesis cupped his eyes, darkening them slightly, and both Remus and Sirius could see the glow. We also glow in black lights. Pretty creepy actually. Harry's eyes were glowing. When his pupils shrunk to slits, they always glowed. Sirius frowned some. He didn't like this, but he knew there was nothing he could do. There were at times things that you could just not explain. Others, you said more were reincarnated. Remus was catching on fast. While he may not believe it all, he knew what he smelled, and he had smelled the same thing around pools across the land hidden deep in forests. Yes, 9 total took the opportunity to return to life once more. 3 soldier first class and 5 Turks and Rufus Shinra, Aegis Shinra's son. 3 of the Weasley children were showing signs of change. Do you know if they were reincarnates? Sirius asked. He had come with Molly and knew she was concerned for her children. Yes, 3 of them are. Genesis pushed himself up once more, the wing vanishing as it retracted into his body. Ginny, I believe was her name, is the reincarnate of a Turk named Sisnai, a very strong-spirited bubbly girl. I only knew her in passing since, well, soldier and Turks don't get along. Turks? What are those? Remus asked. He would ask about the other 2 Weasleys, but he needed to know what Turks were. Let's see if I can put them in perspective. They were Shinra's version of the Russian KGB, or the American CIA, Secret Service. They were the shadow of Shinra. Espionage, undercover infiltration, assassinations, cleanup, surveillance, kidnapping, interrogation, torture, bodyguard. They pretty much did everything. And you're saying that Ginny Weasley is a Turk? Genesis nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Sisnai, though no one knows her real name. Pretty little thing. She was pretty high up in the rankings, very devoted to the Turks, as were most. George Weasley, I believe was his name, is actually Reno of the Turks. He is the commander. Second in command. Irritating as hell, that one. Yo after every fucking sentence. Well, that bagged George in what he was becoming over the summer. Sirius couldn't deny that at all. And Fred? Sirius asked. He hoped the other twin wasn't a Turk as well. It would kill Molly to know 2 of her kids were assassins, let alone 3. Soldier First Class Zachary Fair, aka Poppy. Hyperactive, can't sit still, but a pretty damn good soldier. He was Angel's apprentice before he died. He became Sephiroth's second in command and was one of those in Nibelheim when Seph lost it. He died saving Cloud when they were on the run. How about the others? Arthur said the Ministry interviewed several people. Draco Malfoy is Rufus Shinra. Arrogance and all. Blaise Zabini is Tseng, director of the Turks and one of the best since Vincent Valentine. He's the one currently being fucked senseless by Cloud. He snickered at that and started to walk. He could feel Sephiroth was approaching. The Genova cells in his body always reacted when the man was close. Neville Longbottom. Where do you lot get your names? Is my dear friend and fellow Genova Project Angel Hewley. You cannot find a gentler soul. Pride, dream and honor. Dean Thomas is rude of the Turks, third in command and Reno's partner. He's very quiet. Very. Luna Lovegood is Elena of the Turks. She is the most rookie of them. Kind of on the ditz side but very loyal. Has a huge crush on Tseng. Hearing footsteps, he turned smiling. And here comes Sephiroth. Sure enough, from around the corner came both Sephiroth and Vincent. Sephiroth currently had a chocolate bar sticking from his mouth with huge acid green eyes. Did I forget to mention Sephiroth has a hell of a sweet tooth? Swallowing his candy, Sephiroth moved up, a smile lighting his face. Sirius. Remus. What are you two doing here? Sirius pulled the boy in, hugging him tightly, though his own eyes were huge seeing the changes overcoming the boy. We saw the paper. We were worried about you, knew there was a Hogsmeade weekend, wanted to make sure you were all right. Sephiroth pulled away and looked over, seeing Genesis standing there, and reached out, taking his hand. You told them, didn't you? Genesis nodded. I actually almost decapitated Remus here. They were following me as I came to find you. You buzzed right past me on the road to Hogwarts. You and that sugar addiction of yours. It's nearly as bad as your energy drink addiction. Sephiroth flushed but turned worried eyes on the two closest things he had to family prior to his awakening as Sephiroth. Sirius. Remus? Taking a deep breath, Sirius moved forward and set his hands on Sephiroth's shoulders, already feeling how much muscle was under them. I do not know if I believe it all, but I know what I see. And I know what I smell. No matter if you are Sephiroth or Voldemort himself, you will always been James Potter's son and my godson. Remus, I believe, feels the same. Both turned to look at Remus, who nodded he would leave final judgment for later. Smiling brightly, Sephiroth hugged Sirius tightly. He had honestly been so afraid of them rejecting him. Well, Harry was afraid of them rejecting him. Sephiroth couldn't care less. Is this Cloud? Remus asked, spying the man in the black leathers that had come with Sephiroth. It was obvious by his glowing crimson eyes he had Mako in his system as well. Genesis snorted at this, shaking with silent laughter. No, you will know Cloud when you see him. Short, blonde hair that looks like he got hit with a lightning charm. No, this is Vincent Valentine. Is this the Turk you said was one of the best? Vincent nodded, his bright eyes regarding the two. I am formerly of the Turks. I was killed by Hojo during Project S and used as the host for the Chaos Project. He's also Sephiroth's biological father.
Well, I do hope you enjoyed the videos so far and video game content. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. And I noticed 40% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help me and help the channel grow. Until next time, goodbye!